right, so guys, let us get into our lesson for today. And what we're going to chat about today is the Cartesian plane. All right, so the Cartesian plane is a very important structure or feature that we use in maths, especially when it gets to graphs. But basically, it helps us plot specific points on a set of axes so that we know exactly where our point is. Now, you don't need to take a screenshot of this. This is just like a real life example of how the Cartesian plane is potentially helpful to us. You all do geography. You've all looked at a map. You've all looked at lines of latitude and longitude and coordinates. That is essentially like the Cartesian plane, all right? So what it does is it allows us to pinpoint a very specific area or a very specific point on an X and Y axis where we can then work from. And this can be in many, many different things. We can be talking about a specific shape on our Cartesian plane, and we're going to work with that shape. We can be talking about a graph on our Cartesian plane and then looking at that relationship that the graph expresses. We can be looking at transformations on a Cartesian plane where we maybe rotate a shape or translate a shape, and we need to know exactly where that shape is on our Cartesian plane in order to do all of that. All right, so the Cartesian plane allows us to pinpoint a very specific point on our set of axes. All right, so this is just one real life application of the Cartesian plane, but we're obviously not doing geography. We're now going to apply this to a mathematical context. All right, so the Cartesian plane that you guys need to be comfortable with is that of this one over here. So before we really get into working with the Cartesian plane, what we want to do is just understand what the Cartesian plane is and highlight some important features of the Cartesian plane. Now, the reason this is important is because if you have to draw your own Cartesian plane, you have to have certain labels or certain aspects to the Cartesian plane in order to use it. If you don't, your Cartesian plane doesn't really mean anything. All right, so the first thing about our Cartesian plane that we need to know is what these slightly bolder lines are with the arrows on the end. Yeah, there should be arrows on both sides, like a huge change smash, but anyways. So these are called our axes. We have got two axes that we work with at this point. We have got our horizontal axis, which is our x-axis. So I'm just going to remind us here that this is the horizontal axis. And we've got our vertical axis, which is our y-axis. I don't know why I've chosen to put that all the way there. Our y-axis. So like I say, this is the vertical axis that we draw. Now again, guys, you might have to draw axes yourselves. So you will have to know that you have to draw a vertical line, you have to draw a horizontal line. And then we label them X and Y. All right, it's very, very important that we label the vertical one X. No, see, now I'm lying to you. We label the vertical one Y, so the one that goes up and down is Y, and we label the horizontal one, or the one that goes left and right, X. Now, the reason this is so important is because when we start plotting coordinates, so when we start putting points on this Cartesian plane, we need to know which value relates to the X and which value relates to the Y. Now, we've seen X and Y in number patterns. We know that X is our input. We know that Y is our output. And so when we start to talk about relationships on our Cartesian plane, we're going to go back to that conversation of inputs and outputs. All right, so the first very, very important feature of our Cartesian plane is the fact that we have a vertical axis, which is Y, and a horizontal axis, which is X. The next thing that we need to know is that the point, whoopsie daisies, let's try that again. The point where these axes meet, so the point where they cross each other, is a very special point. It has its own special name, but this is sort of our grounding point, and this is at 0, 0. Now I'm going to explain what a coordinate is now in a second, but excuse me. This point is basically the starting point for our axes to then go to the positive infinity or negative infinity on both x and y. And this point, like I said, has its own special name. It's a unique point on our Cartesian plane, and this is called the origin. So whenever I talk about the origin, I am talking about the point where the two axes meet, okay? So that's just important to know, so that if in a test you see the word origin, you know which point it is. And then for future lessons, when I say the word origin, you know what I'm talking about. All right, the next important thing about our Cartesian plane is the fact that we are working with coordinates. So if we don't know what a coordinate is, that's obviously absolutely fine. We're going to chat about it. But if we just take a quick look at what a coordinate is, a coordinate is basically a set of ordered numbers. I don't know. Sorry, I'm trying to spell ordered, and then it all just went chaotically. Of ordered values. And this word, or this idea of the fact that they're ordered, is very important. Our coordinates will always be written as an x value first, so our input value first, and then a y value, so our output value. That makes sense, right? Because x is what we put in, y is the value that we get out once we've applied our rule. It's alphabetical, so we should remember that, x and then y. And this then relates to our two axes. So the x value relates very specifically then to our x-axis. Those are all our values along our x-axis. My line didn't get any better, but we'll just pretend it did. And then our y values, our output values, relate then directly to my y-axis. So when we're given a coordinate, this is how we are able to pinpoint a specific point. We can say exactly where it is on the x-axis, exactly where it is on the y-axis, and we can then locate its exact position on our Cartesian plane. All right, so when we get to using these axes, because I've now said we've got a set of ordered values that we have coordinates, or that we work with when we do coordinates, our axes also need to have numbers on them. Now, 9 times out of 10, your numbers are going to go up from 1 to infinity. Sometimes they jump, let's say, in 2s or whatever. But as long as you keep your scale or your interval or gap between numbers the same, it really doesn't matter. Like I say, we're mostly going to work with intervals of 1. And so what I mean by that is, if we start at 0 at the origin, we need to imagine both of our set of axes like a number line. So if I move to the right, I'm heading towards positive infinity. And so every tick mark or every block here represents one value. So I'm going up in 1s here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and so we keep going. I'm just going to take this highlighted pink line off. And so what we need to remember again is that on our axes, we need to have numbers, because that's how we get our coordinates. Now, again, we're imagining this like a number line. So if I now go to the left of 0, I'm now working with negative values. So anything to the left of the origin is going to be negative. Anything to the right of the origin is going to be positive. But again, you imagine it like a number line. We all know what a number line is. I've used number lines so often. You guys have used number lines so often. So we know how to put our numbers on. Y is a little bit different just because it's obviously up and down. But just think about it. Up generally means positive, down generally means negative. So as we move up our y-axis, we're increasing by 1 each time. And then the logic would also say, oh, maybe I should put my line properly. I didn't do it any better. Let's try a third time. There we go. And then if I go down below 0, I'm getting my negative values. So -1, -2, -3, and so on. Okay, so this is how we label our axes. we need to have numbers on it because, like I say, when we start working with specific coordinates, we need to know where the numbers are so that we can plot them. But these are your important characteristics of your Cartesian plane. Your two axes, x and y. Your origin is your 0, 0 point, and your origin is always where the two axes, your x and y axes, meet. And then we need to put our numbers on our axes so that when we do plot coordinates, we know what's happening. Right, so I'm just going to wait here in case anyone wants to take a screenshot of this information. And if anyone has a question related to what I've just said, you can now raise your hand and I will help you. I skipped. Oh my gosh. Bonga, thank you. See, this is what happens sometimes when I talk and write. I just do weird things. Thank you, Ayabonga. I missed -4, -5, -6. So I just skipped to -6. Thank you. Right, Nelson, question?
Yeah, sorry, ma'am. What you said was that basically by the origin side, all of them must be negative, and when you go straight down from the vertical line
Yeah,
down, must it be also a negative?
exactly. So when I go to the left of the origin, these x values are all negative. And when I go down from the origin, these y values are now all negative. So exactly what you said. If we then go the other way, so if we now go to the right of my origin, all of my x values are positive. And if I go up from my origin, so up, my y values are all positive. So exactly. And it will always be like that. It doesn't change.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks.
Good, Nelson. Right. Atlahan?
Ma'am,
There we go.
so ma'am, if it's so ma'am, vertical and horizontal, ma'am, they're basically the same.
What do you mean the same?
Like ma'am, positive and negative, ma'am.
Exactly, exactly. So you can almost think of your two axes like two number lines. One's lying down, one's going straight up. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Good. So guys, that's a like good way to remember it. It's basically two number lines. One's sitting horizontally or one's lying flat, one's vertical, but they're both number lines at the end of the day. Right, guys, let's also just remember to mute ourselves. Otherwise, unfortunately, it means when the next person asks a question, we've got a bit of background noise. Tandawake?
Oh, ma'am, as you start also with the input, right, and then you end also the output, or do you start with the output, then you end also the with the input?
Generally, we'll start with the input and then the output because X comes first. So we'll start with that and then we'll plot our output.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So guys, we are obviously going to chat about how to plot points with the input and the output. So we are going to get there. And we will chat about exactly then how to take an input and an output and put it onto the Cartesian plane. Sake? Should be a pop-up to unmute yourself. There we go.
Ma'am?
Hmm.
Ma'am, I would like to ask if, so all the numbers that are positive, all the numbers that are positive are going up.
On the y-axis, yes.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, good. Sorry, guys. I hope I say your name correctly. Zwoluga, but also correct me if I don't.
Ma'am, it's fine. But then, ma'am, what I wanted to ask is like, as you said, the input and the output are like, the y is on the vertical and the x is on the what's this?
Horizontal?
Yes, ma'am. So then like both, like all of them go, like the vertical one goes to the positive one, like is that what you're trying to, so like the output goes to the positive numbers?
So it won't always be positive. We're going to practice some coordinates now. It won't necessarily always be positive, but basically the output must always be plotted somewhere along the y-axis, and then the input must then correspond somewhere along the x-axis. So,
Oh,
okay, so
thank you,
for
ma'am.
we're going to do an example, but for example, if I say, for example, plotted that point over there where that orange circle is, it's a bit excessive, but this is saying if we read up to the x-axis, that our input is 3, and then if we read across to our y-axis, our output is -2. From one point, we get an x and a y.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, good. Guys, we are going to practice this whole plotting coordinate thing now, so don't stress about it. We're going to get there. I'm just using that to answer the question. Mohammed?
Ma'am,
Yes.
what does it mean, the Cartesian plane?
Okay, so the Cartesian plane is basically those two axes, the x and the y axis. It's just, who knows why, it's just a name that we give to the x and the y axis.
Okay.
All right, last one, Teddy. Teddy, I can't quite hear you. Try to speak a bit closer to the microphone.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Is this work for grade 8? Because we haven't learned this yet.
Yeah, it is work for grade 8. You will eventually learn it at school. You might just be doing things in a slightly different order, but it is work for grade 8, yes.
All right, ma'am. Thank you.
Sure. All right, guys. So, okay, Botlale, you are my last one. So, oh no, never mind. Right. So, guys, that is the basics of your Cartesian plane. We are now going to learn how to read coordinates, plot coordinates, and so on. Alrighty, so I'll just ignore that. I've clearly got a bit excited. So if we have a look at this whole beautiful diagram here, we've got a lot of points going on, but let's not get ourselves overwhelmed. Let's pick one point to start off with, and let's see what this point is telling us. So I'm going to pick point A because that's the first point in the alphabet, and we're going to look at point A. Now, if you go to point A, you can see that I've helped us a bit here. I've got these dotted lines that are telling me that if I want the x coordinate, I'll read down to the x value. Let's actually maybe do this. And if I want the y coordinate, I will read across to the y-axis and I will get what its y coordinate is. Now remember, any coordinate is always written x, y. So I always want to write the value of x first, and then I want to write my value of y. So looking at this, we can see, if we go and read our values, we can see that the x coordinate is 3 and my y coordinate is 1. And so we can now write down the exact coordinate for point A, 3, 1. And basically what this does is it tells us that point A can be found at an input or an x value of 1 and an output or y value of, guys, let me start that sentence again. A can be found at an x value of 3 and a y value of 1. And so now we know exactly where to find it on our Cartesian plane. Now, this is obviously helpful to us because I don't have to give you a diagram like this. I could just tell you A is at 3, 1. You would then need to be able to plot the point on the Cartesian plane. So it's very important that we can read coordinates off like we're doing now, but it is also important that we can plot coordinates, and we are going to practice that now. Right, I'm not too sure why some of you are sending random messages on the chat, but please remember, like Yolanda said, we are not spamming the chat. And if you are going to spam the chat, it's very easy for us to just remove you, because now you're just being selfish. All right, so guys, if we go and have a look at point B. So point B, I'm going to do in green. Here we are up at point B. We want to get an X, and then we want to get a Y coordinate. So let's read it off together. If we go down to our X axis, we can get our X coordinate. We can see that's 1. And then if we read across to our Y axis, we can get our Y coordinate, which we can see is 3. So this again gives me a very specific point where I can find that specific point B. Right, so what I want you guys to try for me, and just put it in the chat, is I want you to tell me what the coordinate for point C is. I don't know why I chose yellow. We've yellow, green. We've just done green, so let's do this like bright pink color. I want to know what the coordinate of C is. So put it in the chat for me. What is the coordinate for C? Remember, X first and then Y. Guys, please do remember that you need to put brackets around your coordinates, and in between the two numbers, you need to have a semicolon. It's not a comma, it's not a colon, it is a semicolon. I saw someone say this is very similar to geography. Exactly, and that's why I started with the atlas and the lines of latitude and longitude, because that's basically what we're doing. We're simplifying it a bit, but exactly, Nosipod, like it is like geography. We're finding a specific coordinate. Right, guys, very nice. So if we look at C and we read down to the X, we see our X coordinate is 6. So remember, open bracket, 6 for X. And then we read across for our Y coordinates, and we get our Y coordinate is 2. Now, guys, it's very important that you use a semicolon, because remember, a comma can mean a decimal, or potentially even just, I don't know where my words now went. A decimal is a comma, so we don't use a comma. And the 2 dots, so a colon, we use that in ratios. So we don't want to get confused about, are we talking about ratios? Are we talking about coordinates? It is always 2 brackets and then the semicolon in between your X and your Y. All right, that's how we write it. So just get into the habit of that and life will become a lot easier. All right, so guys, what I want from you now is I'm just going to highlight some random points that I want you to find the coordinates of. So I would like you to find D for me. I'll write a list on the side here, just in case you can't see. D, H, K, and let's do Q. So I want the coordinates of D, H, K, and Q. So on the chat, you are going to give me answers for those 4 coordinates. Remember, brackets, semicolon. And guys, the brackets are not square or like those like squiggly brackets. They are round brackets. Remember, as you put your answers down, remember to label a D coordinate. So basically label it like we wrote down the coordinate A over here. Remember, semicolon, so the one with the dot and then the comma below. D is a bit of a tricky one. So if you're struggling with D, move on to H, K, and Q, and you can come back to it. But I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. You guys are doing really nicely. Well done. And guys, remember to look and see if your number is positive or if it's negative. So when you're reading it off, just make sure you've checked the sign of your X or your Y coordinates. Okay, we're getting there. Well done, grade 8. Keep those answers coming. I'm going to give everyone another minute or so. Remember brackets around your values and remember your semicolon between the X and the Y. Remember it is round brackets, not square or those like curvy ones that we get. Nice, grade 8s. Okay, so if anyone would like to raise their hand to give us some coordinates, you are welcome to offer some answers up now. Excuse me. Right, Lixa, do you want to give me, well, which coordinate would you like to give me? Lixa, you there?
Good. The answer to T is 0. Is yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the answer to D
The answer 7 is 7 comma 0.
Perfect. Okay, so guys, I just want to quickly take 2 seconds and chat about why D is that. Remember, if we have a look where D is actually sitting on the x-axis. So what that means is it hasn't moved up, it hasn't moved down. It has stayed, oh, that's a very bad line. I'm going to try that again. It has stayed in line with 0 on the y-axis. It hasn't gone up, it hasn't gone down. But we can see that the x value is at 7. It's definitely moved across from the origin. So that is why our x and our y values here are 7, 0. Except very nicely done. Tatenda, which one would you like to give me next?
Hello, ma'am. I would like to do the one for 8.
Okay, perfect.
So first of all, it's 3.
Good.
Then semicolon, and then -2. Then you close the brackets.
Perfect. Okay, so guys, very important there. H is where y is -2, and that's why I kept saying check your signs. Because it's now sitting below the x-axis, it is negative. So that's very important. Well done. Alrighty. Princess, would you like to give me K?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell me.
-3 and 2.
Perfect. So guys, now we see that K is on the left of our y-axis. Remember I said up here, if it's left, the x is on negative. And so that means that x is -3. We can read down and see that. And y is 2. Excellent, Princess. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Fortunate, do you want to give us the last one? There we go.
Hello.
Hi.
-7,
Good.
comma, -5.
Excellent. Well done. Right. So guys, again, be very careful of your signs. Make sure you're taking into account whether or not it's positive or negative. Thank you everyone for raising your hand. I appreciate it. We can lower them now. Remember, we try and give everyone a chance. And when I see some new names, I do want to give those people a chance. but I appreciate everyone putting it on the chat. That was awesome. I saw all those great answers coming through, so well done. Let's also just remember to mute ourselves. I'm not too sure who is not muted. And to go
I have
through
muted them. I have muted them.
Okay, perfect. Right. So if you have not taken a screenshot yet, please do so. And then you guys have been very focused, very on top of it. So we're going to take a little brain break and then we'll carry on. And remember, guys, if you have questions, use the chat. That is what it's there for. I keep the chat open the whole time. So I see your questions come through and I will help you. And Yolanda's with us as well and will obviously help you too.
Yes, they got an instruction that they can only ask questions when it's open for questions. So when you're busy teaching, they're only listening. And then when you say it's time for question, they can type their questions. They can do all of that.
And you guys have been amazing. Well done. Mohammed, and then in response to Nosipo, I would definitely take a picture with your phone if you're struggling to take a screenshot on your laptop, because sometimes it is a bit hard on a laptop. So just take a photo on your phone and you got it. All right, guys, well done. All right, so brain break for the day, for the evening. I don't even know where we're at anymore. Brain break. There we go. Remember the deal. What we want is we want the value of the very, very last expression over here. It went a bit wonky, but anyways. So we want to know the value of each of those things in order for us to work out the value of the final expression. So remember, we want final answers on the chat there, and we'll wait for the correct one. I need to quickly do it myself so that I can agree or disagree. And guys, remember, as much as this is a brain break and something fun, these are going to help you so much when it gets to equations and even just like simplifying algebra, because if you can see like terms, even if it's just a picture, it is very useful. Remember to look out for doubles, and as I'm seeing that it's not very clear, so in this last one, there are two sparklers. I don't know how you spell sparklers. Let's just pretend it's that.
Can I please have the joke? I want to take a screenshot. I love it. I just want to take a screenshot of it.
I can't even remember. What was it? Why should you never talk to Pi?
Thank you. Let's go, my people.
Oh, you guys are so fast tonight. I'm struggling to keep up. I'm also going to sneeze. No. I'm feeling quite silly tonight, I must be honest. My brain's not working as well as it should be.
So I'm just gonna explain to our newbies. So basically, this time is the time for you to just stretch. You don't have to worry about anything. Whenever you join our classes, you'll understand what's going on. Basically, this is just something to crack your head on. It's fun and it's maths things. So please don't stress about it, you know? It's just you're trying to find the final answer, basically. That's what we are trying to do there, okay? To my newbies, to my new people, fresh meat. So please don't panic, okay? It's not part of what you, well, in a way it's math, but don't panic about it if you don't understand. Slowly, when you're joining our classes, you'll understand what we do in this thingy. Luando, I don't think you have. Luando
Guys, I'm
doesn't.
so sorry. I've been very slow working this out because I made a very silly mistake. And so silly mistakes happen. Let's hope I've got it now. I'm going to double check my math. So.
Alicia, you got the right answer. Alicia, would you like to raise your hand so you can tell us how did you get your answer? I'm just double checking if anyone else got the right answer, but Alicia, so far it was you, so we can unmute Alicia so Alicia can explain. Ooh, Mivuyo got it first.
Well done,
That's
Mivuyo.
fine.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, ma'am, I did 9 plus 20 times 5 equals 109.
Okay, so where did the 9s come from?
The 9s were the flags, and then the 5 was the popcorn.
Good. Okay, so 9 plus 9 plus 9 is 27. 9 times 9, remember BODMAS, is 81. So that means the popcorn exactly is 5 because 5 plus 81 is 86. What were the sparklers, Alicia?
10.
10. Good. Again, BODMAS, 10 times 10 is 100 plus 5 is 105. Now, because you've got 2 sparklers here, guys, that's 20 times 5. And again, BODMAS first, which is 100. And then plus the 9 of the flags, we get 109. Very well done. Excellent. I made a very silly mistake and said right at the second step, 5 plus 81. No, I said 7 plus 81 gives me 86. Who knows what was happening? Right, guys.
Done, guys.
Well done. Okay, so just to remind you, what we've looked at is being able to read coordinates off the Cartesian plane. But like I said, we also need to be able to plot coordinates on the Cartesian plane. Now, we didn't do all of these, and that's fine because it gets a bit repetitive. But as long as you can read an X and a Y, you're good. So let's have a look and see how we plot coordinates on our Cartesian plane. So I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so that we've got quite a nice big Cartesian plane here. And we're just going to start with A again. We don't have to rush this. If we look at A, remember, this is giving me an X value and a Y value. Now, when we plot, generally, I start with X. You don't have to, but X comes first. X is the input. We're going to start with X. So when I plot X, we go to -2 on the X axis. So here it is. And we've got 1 on the y-axis. So there's 1 on the y-axis. What we essentially need to go and do is we need to go to the point where those 2 lines, dotted lines, meet. And where they meet each other, we have got our coordinate A. And we can always double check each other. We can double check ourselves. If we move down, we get -2. And if we move across, we get 1. And that was the coordinate that we wanted to plot. Right, those of you asking, must you draw it? I would, just to practice, but remember, I will give you time to take a screenshot of it. So if you don't get all of it down, that's okay. We're also not going to do all of those points. So I would draw it, but I will let you take a screenshot in case you don't get all of it down. Right, so those of you saying you don't understand, I'm going to say it again. We now want to plot the point. So we're plotting point A. Point A is at X is -2. So we go to -2 on our X axis. And Y is 1. So we go to Y1 on our Y axis. And essentially where those 2 vertical and horizontal lines meet, where they cross, that is where I'm going to find my point A. If you think about it, it's very similar to what we had here for point A. Where those 2 lines met each other, we found our coordinate. And so when we plot this point, that's exactly what we have. We've now got the coordinates -2 and 1, x and y. All right, so when we plot coordinates, essentially all we want to do, sorry, I just want to neaten that up. All we want to do is plot one point that represents what our x is and what our y is according to the coordinates given. So if we try another one, let's do C. Right, so if we go to C, C is an x coordinate of 4 and a y coordinate of 2. So we go to where x is 4, we go to where y is 2, and essentially where those meet each other, so where the vertical and horizontal lines meet each other, that is where I'm going to get my point. Oh, not B, C. Yo, pen. Let's try again. Let's try one more time. My point, C, at 4, 2. And we can double check ourselves. If we take off our dotted lines and we go and read off, because remember, we don't actually want the dotted lines. We just want the point. If we read it off, there's 4, there's 2. And so I've correctly plotted my coordinate there. Alrighty, so it's going to be quite interesting to try this as a team, but what I would like you guys to try is figure out where point D would go. So let's start with D. And then someone hopefully is going to be able to explain to me where D is going to go. So I'm going to give you a second. I just want to turn on my lights. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Let's go, guys. Today's Monday. You have polls day, not a quiz day, okay? But let's go. Try and practice. Try and practice, okay? There we go.
All right, would anyone like to raise their hand to try and explain to me how I'm going to plot point D? Watobe?
Hi, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
So, ma'am, on the line for x, ma'am, at the end there's 5, so we're gonna go down once to -1.
Excellent. Okay, so I quite like that explanation there, guys. So because we're at or on the x-axis at 5, we know that this -1 means we've gone down 1 unit. So you can almost think of it like moving a point. And when we go down 1 unit, that is where we're going to get our coordinate for D. Right, excellent, well done. So I want you to now have a think about where we would plot point B. So think about where you'd plot point B. And if anyone wants to raise their hand up, you can let me know where you think it would go. Blue pen going here. Offensive, where would point, what did I say, B go? Offensive? Oh, okay. Let's try someone else. Vishali, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm not.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So the point would still be on 3.
Okay, so on the x-axis.
Yes.
Perfect. So guys, exactly, because the y is 0, it hasn't moved up or down. And so point B is sitting on the x-axis at 3, because that's what x is, but hasn't gone up or down. And so we've got our point B 3, 0. Excellent. Well done. Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
so guys,
Bye.
when we are plotting points, I might have clicked unmute again. You can just ignore me. When we're plotting points, it's very important that we understand that one little dot, one little point represents both the x and the y. So if we just have a look at one more together and we look at point, I think it was K that I wanted to do. If we look at point K, this is at -2, -2. So x is -2 and y is -2. So where they meet each other, we are getting our coordinate for K. And so we can plot our point.